Hello, viewers. In theory, the central focus of Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage Season 2, Episode 13 was meant to revolve around Georgie reaching an important milestone, his 21st birthday. Ordinarily, that kind of occasion would naturally serve as the emotional and narrative anchor for a lighthearted and celebratory storyline. Turning 21 carries particular cultural significance in the United States, often symbolizing entry into a new stage of adulthood and independence. It's commonly associated with parties, recognition from family and friends, and the freedom to legally purchase alcohol for the first time. Given all of that, it would have made perfect sense for the episode to revolve around Georgie enjoying his moment in the spotlight. However, rather than unfolding as a traditional birthday-centered episode, the story took a surprising and more emotionally layered direction. Instead of simply watching Georgie celebrate his milestone, the narrative shifted toward Mandy's struggle to piece together the events of a night she could barely remember after drinking far too much. The episode's structure leaned heavily on her attempts to reconstruct what had happened while she was intoxicated, so she could figure out what she needed to apologize for and how badly she might have hurt the people around her. This shift in focus transformed what could have been a straightforward celebratory story into something much more complex and character-driven. One of the most interesting aspects of the episode was the storytelling technique it used. Rather than presenting events in a simple, chronological fashion, the narrative relied on a sequence of flashbacks triggered by Mandy's conversations with others the morning after the party. As she tried to make sense of her actions, each interaction provided another fragment of the previous night's events. This device allowed viewers to gradually uncover the truth alongside her, creating a sense of discovery that made the episode feel more immersive and emotionally engaging. At the same time, it preserved the show's comedic tone without turning Mandy's behavior itself into the primary punchline. What made this approach especially effective was how realistic it felt. Anyone who has experienced, or known someone who has experienced, the aftermath of drinking too much understands the anxiety and uncertainty that can accompany trying to reconstruct the previous night's events. The show captured that feeling in a way that felt authentic without being heavy-handed. Instead of relying on exaggerated humor or slapstick consequences, it allowed the comedy to emerge naturally from the awkwardness of Mandy's situation and the reactions of those around her. Even so, the episode's most memorable moments weren't necessarily the funniest ones. In fact, the emotional weight behind Mandy's actions often overshadowed the humor. That doesn't mean the episode failed as a comedy, far from it, but it did lean more heavily into drama than viewers might have expected. The strongest elements of the story came from exploring why Mandy behaved the way she did and what her choices revealed about her state of mind. As a result, the episode worked especially well as a character study about someone struggling with disappointment, insecurity, and regret during what should have been a joyful occasion. Stories about characters who turn to alcohol as a coping mechanism can sometimes feel predictable or overly sentimental, but this episode handled the theme with surprising nuance. Rather than portraying Mandy as simply irresponsible or self-indulgent, the narrative made an effort to show the emotional pain driving her behavior. Her actions were clearly problematic and disruptive, yet they were also understandable in the context of everything she had been dealing with. That balance helped prevent her from coming across as selfish or overly dramatic, even though her behavior could easily have been interpreted that way. In fact, Georgie himself initially saw her actions through a more critical lens. From his perspective, what should have been a celebration of his milestone birthday turned into an evening dominated by Mandy's struggles and emotional outbursts. It was only natural for him to feel hurt and frustrated that the focus had shifted away from him during a moment that was supposed to be about his achievement. Yet, as the episode unfolded, it became clear that Mandy's behavior wasn't rooted in a desire to steal attention. Instead, it reflected a deeper sense of dissatisfaction with how her own life had turned out. One of the key sources of Mandy's distress was the realization that her relationship with Georgie and the unexpected pregnancy that accompanied it had dramatically altered the course of her life. Coming to terms with those changes was already difficult enough, but seeing Georgie reach a milestone that symbolized progress and opportunity only intensified her feelings of uncertainty. While he was stepping into a new phase of adulthood filled with possibilities, she felt as though her own options had become increasingly limited. The age difference between them added another layer of complexity to her emotions. Watching Georgie celebrate his 21st birthday likely served as a powerful reminder of just how far apart they were in terms of life experience and expectations. For him, turning 21 represented a fresh beginning. For Mandy, it underscored how much time had already passed and how different her circumstances were from what she had once imagined for herself. That contrast made it even harder for her to feel optimistic about her future. It's also important to consider the professional setbacks Mandy had recently experienced. Not long ago, she had been working as a waitress while trying to build something better for herself. Eventually, she managed to secure a position that brought her closer to achieving her ambitions, and for a brief period, it seemed as though her persistence was finally paying off. Unfortunately, that opportunity didn't last. Losing the job she had hoped would transform her life left her feeling adrift and discouraged. Without the stability and sense of purpose that role had provided, it became much harder for her to maintain confidence in her direction. Given all of that, it's not surprising that Mandy reached a point where she wanted to escape her feelings, even if only temporarily. Drinking to excess became a way of avoiding the weight of her disappointment, at least for one night. While her decision to do so created problems for everyone around her, it also reflected a very human response to frustration and uncertainty. The episode didn't excuse her behavior, but it did make an effort to explain it. Mary's role in the episode added another interesting dimension to Mandy's experience. As Georgie's mother, Mary naturally wanted to celebrate her son's birthday in a meaningful way. Her enthusiasm was completely understandable and entirely appropriate. However, from Mandy's perspective, the attention being directed toward Georgie only heightened her own sense of inadequacy. Watching him receive recognition and support while she struggled with her own setbacks made her feel as though she was falling further behind. This sense of comparison played a significant role in shaping Mandy's actions that night. In her mind, Georgie seemed to have everything going for him, while she felt stuck in a situation that didn't match the expectations she had once held for herself. Whether or not that perception was accurate didn't really matter. What mattered was how strongly she believed it in the moment. That belief fueled the emotional spiral that ultimately led to her drinking far more than she should have. Of course, Georgie had every reason to be upset about how the evening unfolded. Both of the birthday celebrations planned in his honor ended up being overshadowed by Mandy's behavior. Instead of enjoying a carefree night surrounded by people who wanted to celebrate him, he found himself dealing with the fallout from her actions. Under those circumstances, his frustration was entirely justified. What made his response especially meaningful, though, was the way he chose to handle the situation once his initial anger faded. Rather than holding a grudge, he eventually forgave Mandy and made an effort to support her as she worked through her feelings. He reminded her that she wasn't as old as she seemed to think she was, and that her life still held plenty of possibilities. More importantly, he encouraged her to look at her experiences from a different perspective. Georgie's suggestion that some of life's biggest regrets can lead to unexpected blessings carried a lot of emotional weight. It reflected a hopeful way of thinking about the twists and turns that shape people's lives. Even though Mandy felt as though her choices had limited her opportunities, he argued that those same choices had also brought her things she might not want to lose. In his view, her past decisions hadn't simply closed doors, they had opened new ones as well. Of course, viewers already know that their marriage isn't destined to last forever, which adds a bittersweet quality to his reassurance. When he pointed out that her mistakes had ultimately led to their relationship, the comment carried less comfort than it might have otherwise. Still, his willingness to see their connection as something positive demonstrated how deeply he cared about her. Ultimately, what stood out most about Georgie's reaction was his empathy. Despite being hurt by her actions, he still made an effort to understand what she was going through and to offer the kind of encouragement she needed. That willingness to be patient and supportive highlighted an important aspect of his character. It showed that he wasn't just capable of forgiveness, he was also capable of being the kind of partner Mandy needed during a difficult moment in her life. If Mandy can learn to accept that support and move past her own insecurities, there's every reason to believe their relationship could become stronger as a result. Georgie has already demonstrated that he has both the compassion and the determination required to stand by her. The question is whether she can allow herself to believe that she deserves the kind of understanding he's offering. Thank you for watching this episode on our channel. Please don't forget to like, share, and comment for more video on Bullseye movies.